Welcome to another edition of Simply Stated. Today, as you can see, I have a new sort of backdrop and a whole bunch of topics to cover after the last week. I almost to the point of wanting to make Simply Stated like twice a week. I really could. But I have to admit, it's probably like one of the least popular shows on my YouTube channel, with Simply Yoga with Ever being the most popular when I wear two pieces. So that shows you where people are at. But today's show, we're going to be talking about the Ukraine, and we're going to talk about some issues in the fashion design world, economics, and we're going to go through some of the issues as well with some Hollywood stuff to discuss as usual, and talk about cartels and organizations to avoid going forward after everything. Because I collected more than enough information when I was down in the Washington, D.C. area. And, let's just kind of go from there. The big thing is that, as you probably all saw last week, was sort of the blow up at the White House with the Ukrainian leader, Zelensky, and President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. And I think the biggest issue there for a lot of people was that they didn't really understand what was going on. I would say it was definitely not good at first, but it was very real. And it's kind of important to recognize that there's some very real issues going on. We're all sort of in our own little... If you didn't, study Ukrainian policy, how do you sort of navigate through the topic? And for me, I'm actually a leading economic specialist and wrote leading policy papers, and actually have been published in Motley Fool, which is actually a really well-respected publication on finance and economics, and also was published in some more conservative publications. It was published as long ago as 2012. So my main point was that the Ukraine is a mineral-rich country with lots and lots of resources. And the most important thing was that they be allowed to get independence from from either what might have been the EU or Russia or anyone else, that they be an independent country that is not under the control of some other entity, and especially not Russia, because Russia called them their breadbasket and was dependent on them. And so Russia had to be disabused of that notion. As far as U.S. leadership or anyone telling them to just simply put up with Russian aggression, nobody can say that. They have 4,000 children missing and countless lives lost, and frankly, just multiple buildings destroyed, catastrophic waste to their country from Russia. So as far as what the U.S. approach has been, is that unfortunately, President Biden really wasn't a very good president. He had dementia. A number of us had already put in policy recommendations. I'm not with a specific political party, although I've been a part of the Republican Party, but I just said, because of the problems with our U.S. signet systems, because Booz Allen Hamilton is a Russian and Chinese company, because they undermine all of our military operations abroad, we can simply not go to the Ukraine. They were too insistent on trying to get us to go to the Ukraine, the company here in the U.S., because it's a Russian company, and planning to undermine operations again, and planning to just deliver the Ukraine over to Russia. And they did that with Afghanistan and also Iraq. They actively undermined operations and frankly got people killed on purpose, and wasted our money and resources. And of course, their excuse for all of it was that they just need to be paid more. And I talked to many times with contractors at the company that just flat out told me that they refused to do jobs correctly, and they were always going to do them wrong. It was really, really frustrating, painful. And to see that they had built Endeavor WE, which does nothing but steal from people and set up Russian operatives and Chinese CCP operatives, is to undermine U.S. media. Is important to understand as well, because what you get sometimes over U.S. media has been hacked by them and may be incorrect. Here's what you really need to know. The U.S. taxpayers are broke. The country is really broke, and we struggle constantly with conflicts because of the Russian FSB presence here in the U.S. I myself recently went through a number of injuries and just ridiculousness. It's like constant warfare for U.S. citizens even trying to live here. And so what I'm saying about all of this is that the most important objective for anybody looking at what's been going on for Ukraine was for them to become an independent entity that had, was not going to be sucked into some kind of modern USSR configuration, and would be allowed to actually take care of themselves and be an independent country and an adult is another way to put it, developmentally, that as a country it was an adult. And what I saw in that conversation between the Vice President Donald Trump and Zelensky, President Donald Trump and the leader of the Ukraine, Zelensky, is that Zelensky is an adult and Ukraine is ready to be an adult country. The conversation almost went like a bad breakup because we're out of money and resources and we can't afford to send people over there. And also Zelensky had twice disagreed with the U.S. Secretary of State on the minerals contract agreement. Now that could be both bad and good for the U.S. because as far as the U.S. is concerned, trying to go over to Ukraine and have a minerals agreement with them could be really it might not be a good thing. I'm not even going to try to use a larger word for this. Because we would have to have had contractors or send our own military to guard some of the resources. And we are not in a good position to do that because of the problems I've described in the past with our U.S. military systems. And it would mean money and risk to us. And we're a mineral-rich country. We have more than enough oil. We have more than enough minerals. We don't actually need the Ukrainians' resources. To have an agreement with them would be good for us, too, because it's more resources. Yes, that would be very nice. But if it was at the cost of us as to having more troops sent or to spend more money we simply don't have, that is not a good thing for us. And so you don't want everything in the world. Every resource is not necessarily always needed or wanted. Sometimes letting things go is important. So what you really saw last week was basically a breakup. And not, what you would compare maybe to like a breakup of a romantic relationship or something. Not that there was one, but that's the closest thing I compare it to for everyday life. So it was just simply time for everyone's both parties to be independent of each other. And since then, Zelensky has gone and he has talked about it with the UK and also France, and he has agreed to put together an agreement for ramping down the war with Russia. Not to put up with Russia, not to say that Russia can come and occupy the Ukraine or keep the Ukraine or is welcome to any resources from the Ukraine, but that they have a plan they are putting together with these two other countries in Europe to begin to take care of themselves, to not need so much money and resources from the U.S., and to, ramp this thing down, conflict down. So that's really good news, and it's also something that had been wanted. Now, let's talk about another conflicting issue or parallel issue. And this is something I had discussed when I was in the Washington, D.C. area, and something I even discussed with who was then U.S. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida's office. And they were familiar with what happened to my mom in Florida and what had happened to me. Here's the thing, and I'm going to tell you this very carefully. Europe has a lot of money and resources and is very rich because there are several things they don't do that the U.S. does, which is a mistake. We play the Russian game with our real estate. We build too much. We don't get places rented out or bought. We let them burn and destroy buildings for insurance here, or try to play some other really weird games with that. We make the mistake of trying to be strongman. We have the strongman syndrome. We want to go out in the world and take care of everyone else. We feel like we can fix everyone else's problems. And the reality is that the U.S. is very much a country that is unstable in many ways and is not much different than Central America or South America. We have problems with terrorists. We have problems with cartels. We're coming over here internationally all the time. We're not in the position to take care of everyone else, and we had to stop seeing ourselves that way. And I lobbied for that for a long time. One of the reasons I got trafficked, one of the traffickers that took advantage of me, was that they said, well, you have all this and you have all that, and you need to share it, you give to people. And so I was doing all this free labor and exhausted and poor. And I had to come to a point of saying, no, I just simply can't do it because I don't have it. I have to take care of myself now. And it's really become important for the U.S. to do that for itself as well. And frankly, you have to remember, Europe either has been actively saying they wish we would pull back on issues and stop trying to be so dominant militarily, or more importantly, maybe they've had Russian activists even saying that, wanting to have it both ways, because Russia and China have benefited heavily from us trying to be active out in the rest of the world, the neocon strategy, because of Booz Allen Hamilton. Because Booz Allen Hamilton works for Russia and China. So when now U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio talks about Europe being wealthy and how they can handle these issues themselves, that's what they're getting at. That we're done with the strongman mentality in the U.S. We're done trying to be Atlas. We're going to shrug and also admit that we just aren't Atlas. It isn't Atlas shrugged anymore. It's plain old just, we're not going to play that role in the world. We don't have the money for it. We don't have the energy for it. And frankly, a lot of Americans are much like me. They have too many back injuries to keep doing it. So that's what it really is. And President Trump even said that after the meeting. And I decided to wait all this time because I just thought, I spent all those years working in policy and meetings, and I can just pull back and let people kind of do their thing with all of it. But getting upset about it or saying, "Oh, that's so terrible for the U.S." No, but the U.S. really has to work on their budgets. We have to work on our budgets as a country. Biden had really serious dementia. You saw the blow up with Burisma and how ridiculous that was. There's no getting around President Biden's dementia. And the setup with Burisma, I had talked about with the U.S. government over 20 years ago because he'd made me back Luther College, he was going to do that. He's Russian. He's a Russian oligarch. By the way, none of these meetings mean that the U.S. supports Russia. Just last week on Monday, President Trump literally was sitting in the Oval Office doing some policy talks and started making fun of Russia and talking about how the U.S. had put together a plan for people to buy citizenship and visas for themselves. And he said, joking around about would Russian oligarchs here in the U.S. be able to do that? He said, sure, but he said, I don't think Russian oligarchs have as much money as they used to. They don't have as much money as they used to. Do you think a Russian oligarch could still afford U.S. citizenship? Probably not. So it isn't a stance to support, Russia. And I saw some ridiculous article about how Putin's just sitting back enjoying all this. No, Putin does not enjoy any of this. Putin has very much Russia, China, Xi Jinping, they've all benefited from the U.S. having a guilt complex that may even be created by people from those countries and trying to do too much for everyone else. They're simply not going to do it anymore. So, it's as embarrassing as hard as it was to watch all that unfold last week. I think it was really good because what I saw was 3 really strong leaders. And the most important thing for Ukraine to do is to be an adult, and they're doing that. So I'm not worried about any of this. I think it's great. It's also important to note that U.S. Treasury Scott Bessent stated on Saturday that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky twice refused to sign a minerals deal with the U.S. So that's been restated as of Saturday by them. Let me make sure I've got Scott's name right, because I'm not gonna. Look it up on my tablet. Treasury. Bessent. Okay. Bessent. So, anyways, keep that in the back of your mind. Because my policy work, which by the way was ripped off by a guy of Russian ancestry, who's been trying to present my work at conferences from Luther College. And I was tortured and beat up over this. I was raped and beaten and tortured by Russian supporters, activists here in the U.S. back in for the military, which included Charlize Theron, actually, the woman who plays Charlize Theron, back in 2019. It's just, Luther College is a joke, and it really just needs to be shut down. I appreciate the efforts with the Department of Education and penalizing workers and firing them, but I really think that some kind of action has to be taken against the school as a private entity, because it's very clearly a private WWE. And it leads to me having these shows that are just completely confusing for everybody else and sort of mind-boggling. But I think, the shows are good, too, because they give people some clarity as to what somebody would mean when they say lies and media accuracy information in the U.S. and disinformation. So, let's talk about some other issues here, because we need to go through, let's see. Well, anyways, I was looking at something here on Karen Bass in Los Angeles and TikTok, and then decided there wasn't any point in doing a story on that. So here's the 6 Mexican drug cartels that have been named by the U.S. government. There's the Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, the Gulf cartel, the Northwest cartel, the Nueva Familia Mexicana cartel, the United Cartels, Tren de Agua of Venezuela, and Marca Salvatrucha of El Salvador. It's also called MS-13. 5 years of Spanish, and I talk like that. So, but I'm also reading my sort of gibberish. you can't ask the Ukraine just go back to real quickly to just put up with aggressions from Russia. I don't think anyone actually is, but it has to be reminded that no one's actually asking them to do that. So it's just that we're out of money. That's pretty much it. And I hopefully that we do work out a minerals agreement with them that's actually good for us. If it means us having to go over there and do a lot of military operations, that's just not going to be good for us at this point. And it is because we're ramping up with these issues on the cartels. Now, because the U.S. government has put together language already to go after the cartels in Central America and South America, where some of them are coming from, which is really just a different way of engaging in war with Russia and the Chinese CCP, the Russian FSB and Chinese CCP, because they keep trying to attack us with these cartel groups here in the U.S. And they're on the they're in all 50 states, you know. So, I mean, it's, when you look at what we're going through here, that's another part of the conversation. And maybe even like where some of the aggravation and frustrated talk is even coming from. So, so going from there, to look at this all. Yeah, I put together a list here. I'm just trying to think if I still want to go through all this. So here's some organizations to avoid that I dealt with over the years. I would say from Westminster Presbyterian Church USA, they were very much part of the cartels, very obviously so during the Bush years too. And then also in Dubuque, Iowa, the Dubuque Theological Seminary, they worked with CIRSE and a number of different organizations that were Russian FSB and tied to the drug cartels, which are now called terrorist groups. Unfortunately, there were too many people I knew of at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church in Arlington, Virginia that were being trafficked and couldn't really get through to some of the pastors there on the issues. You know, it was a place where people very easily ended up being raped or beaten, or supposed to be raped or beaten by people from the cartels, or Russian FSB, Chinese CCP. I had a friend who was an actual civil rights lawyer who literally told me that I would mostly just find people who were being labor trafficked there when I went there, and I did. And, you know, there were some answers given, but I just saw a lot of people working through something pretty horrible. I would stay away from the so Westminster Presbyterian Church USA in Dubuque, Iowa, the Dubuque Theological Seminary. Now actually it's probably turned into a cemetery at this point. The National Presbyterian Church on Nebraska Avenue, Northwest DC, the Father Fred Foundation here in Traverse City, the Old Baptist Church of Charlottesville, Grace Church in Arlington, run by John Sly. He was one of the professors at Luther College. He stole my voice and used it for the woman you know as JLo today, who's given the name Blanca Kershak there. She's a member of the cartels, the Russian FSB, really nasty version. Luther College in Iowa, it's a labor camp run by the FSB, stay away from it. And there's lots and lots of churches across the U.S. that are associated with the drug cartels. So, you know, I know that, like, one of the sheriffs down in Florida did an announcement last week and, you know, trying to reassure people saying, you know, your mosques, your temples, your churches, your synagogues are all safe. You know, you don't have to worry about them being raided by DHS. Well, the reality is that I wouldn't go anywhere that you think there's a significant number of cartel members that you would be trapped and wouldn't just simply be able to leave, which is really a problem with synagogues, temples, churches. Same thing with certain restaurants. You know, because they could be raided, and you shouldn't go through life being afraid as a U.S. citizen, or even as a, you know, some of the people even from Border Patrol have gone as far as say, even if you are an illegal immigrant, you're not who needs to be worried. Who needs to be worried are people who are U.S. citizens and illegal immigrants who are working with what are now defined as terrorist groups, which is the drug cartels. So you simply cannot support them in any form or capacity. And that's the hard part, because there were some people I knew even at Emmanuel Presbyterian that I got along with, and now I have to say we're nothing to each other, you know, because they failed to get out. And the rest of us who did, you know, we can feel bad for them, but that's about it. It sucks, but you get away from them, and doing that is really hard because you have to sort of look at a completely different life plan. Like people, I mean, like just last week, I was living in a house that was not good, not safe. There was just weird stuff going on there, and you know, I had to take the steps that a U.S. citizen would, and I couldn't get out of there one day because of snow. And I looked out the steps, getting out, so I got to get to work. I got to go to my job, and I knew the only way I was going to get out of the house is if I just plain old fell down the steps, you know. And so I had to just go ahead and fall down the steps to get out of there. And, you know, they determined a few weeks ago not to even keep my car there anymore until I finally moved. Like, this is modern American warfare, dealing with weirdos, with them. and their effect on the rest of society and how they screw everything up. I mean, back when I first moved to DC, the Washington DC area in 2002, I went to a number of groups where I talked to people who said that it wasn't uncommon for some of them to be trapped in homes and to realize it was a setup from the cartels, and literally, you know, during the winter season, too much snow or whatever, to have to go fall down a flight of stairs just to get out. You know, because you can't stay there. So if your back got injured or whatever, that's just how it went. It's how it is. And it still is sometimes for some of us. And that's, you know, dealing with the reality of life. You know, and I want to note that for you, you know, the CIA, quote unquote, came out after Trump last week. That's not actually true. The correct answer is Booz Allen Hamilton, which has an over 40% contract still at the CIA, need to be fired and removed from them after, you know, former Vice President and then President H.W. Bush gave them a significant share in the agency, which is what ruined the agency, okay, in the 80s. You know, they still need to be removed from it, and so they've been putting out these false media saying that it's the CIA that's mad at Donald Trump and it's Booz Allen Hamilton because he's simply just not going to play the ridiculous game anymore. And nobody else is either, and they run Endeavor WE as well. It's basically the same company. So, you know, as I said before, there's no intelligence with Booz Allen Hamilton. They're just weird ass clowns, basically. And I did see the note that Tulsi Gabbard hired new people yet, or what did she do? She fired 100 intelligence officers for group chats over explicit behavior from 15 different agencies. I have no idea if she's going to hire anybody else. That's not my job. It's just a show that I put together as material, but she definitely fired a bunch of people. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if they were all for Booz Allen Hamilton, because the U.S. government is going through a long fight over the last 20 years to fire them and get rid of them because they keep hacking and taking contracts because they're run from the FSB of Russia. I did catch a really weird... Sometimes people send me the strangest things. Somebody sent me Clara, and it's 1970s Disney adventure film about a young woman they call The Reaper's Journey, about Clara, about a young woman who goes into the woods looking for information about her lost family. It's a horror film, basically reminding people to not go back, to not go into weird places looking for what is already gone, which I know better than to do, right? But how many of us have gotten dragged into being told we had to go look for things we didn't want to anymore because of all this sort of weird drama with the cults and the cartels and the terrorists in the U.S. And so, you know, from there, I think we could move into some other... I need to note for you that I recently did a dance show on Aaliyah and her death, and what it was noted to me by Wilhelm, the Russian FSB, is the reason she got murdered finally. There were some people tied to her death at Luther College. She was 4 years past the age of 22, and she was no longer willing to do what they said. And she had legal independence, and she was starting to speak up for herself and was moving towards legal action, so they just killed her. Which is a really, really sad story. I need to also note for you that I had noted that there was a man in the Hollywood industry who was David Lynch or posed as David Lynch with the name Scott Zaczak. You know, he was also Mr. Ray at Table Mound Elementary in Iowa and was responsible for the Flying Dutchman that hit the school. It's a type of missile. He worked for the Chinese CCP, Russian FSB. I haven't seen him since November up in Michigan. Like, he was up here wearing a funny outfit, costuming himself. So he was still alive as of last summer, but if in fact he really was David Lynch and David Lynch has been named as dead, then maybe he's really gone. From this world. And I know it's really hard for people to understand, but because there's so much misinformation, you know, because you think David Lynch is some 70-year-old guy or 80-year-old man that finally died of, like, emphysema or something, lung problems, like, during the fires in LA, and maybe that's really not it at all. There's just no one's ever going to bother to really explain the whole thing because it was too bizarre with Scott, either being him or working for him on films. So, and I know about that, having gone through it firsthand, having worked on Mulholland Falls. Or been forced to work on it, actually. I also noticed there's a really weird trend right now, which people kind of need to be aware of, where there's a couple different groups going around spreading really weird, obnoxious gold jewelry all over the place on the internet. And it's supposed to be free. It's very much tied to gang groups that are distributing it, and I just looked at it and thought this looks really gangstery and weird, like tied to the cartels, terrorist groups, and I don't think the rest of us want to be involved in that. So I took a pass on it, even though it was offered to me for free by 2 different groups. So, you know, do whatever you want to do with your life, but I have to admit, I don't really trust anybody handling out what's supposed to be gold jewelry online. Any group passing it out, handing out, mailing it out, whatever you want to call that, shipping it out. Just really too strange. And then, let's see. I need to go through a few other things here. Yeah, the Oscars was last night. I didn't watch it. I was busy working. I wouldn't watch it anyways. But I think it's kind of important to note that it was terrible. Like the few clips I saw, it just like this really weirdly Chinese CCP type event. I saw the footage of Adam Sandler making jokes about it. He was there in a sweatshirt, and I had to laugh at that. Thought that was funny. I saw a little bit of footage of J-Lo's looked horrible. And then I ended up doing the song "Diamonds Are Forever" as a show teaser today, just to kind of make up for whatever Doja Cat just did to the song. Some of you may have looked at that clip and thought, Doja Cat's not in Endeavor? Like, what is Endeavor doing? Well, here's the problem. When I was going through investigations on the DC area, I was trying to get away from Endeavor and the trafficking. And I had people who literally come to meetings and they claimed that they worked at CAA too. I said, no, you don't. They said, you do. So I tried to work with them a little more because CAA is where I had my primary relationships originally. And Kendrick had stolen my files or claimed to steal my files. Said, you don't have a right to be in the industry. I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. You know, I go out and find another job. Tried to go work at E! Entertainment. They wanted to hire me. Lauren Sanchez came through and started threatening me, and I was getting threats from basically drug dealers and cartels. And couldn't take a job at E! Entertainment where I clearly belonged. It's important to know that. So here's the thing. As far as anybody else would know, I was somebody who just simply moved on, and they thought just left the industry. And in fact, for years I was being labor trafficked by it, and being labor trafficked by Endeavor WE. That's the point. And that they would even lie and claim they were at CAA. So I can tell you with all authority, based on decades of experience, that Doja Cat is not represented by people at CAA. They are truly at Endeavor WE and part of what is now considered the Russian FSB. Also, these cartel groups, and now called terrorist groups by the U.S. Which explained why she would do, or they would have her do such a bizarre performance of the song with the Oscars. Also, notably, why people don't watch the Oscars as much anymore. Tired of it. So, this is really weird. Last week, Endeavor WE dropped Meghan Markle on Wednesday. The Royal Network News was making fun of her. Royal News Network was making fun of her, saying, look, you know, she has a veneer. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, well, yeah, she also wears veneers for her teeth, which are really ugly and weird too. And it just looks like a totally weird spook. Yeah, I don't think dropping Meghan Markle because of a bad cooking show or anything else is actually going to make a difference. She's clearly engaged in some pretty overt terrorist activity, but the whole company is founded by weirdos to sell drugs and traffic kids. You can't really do anything about that. You know, dropping her isn't going to change the entire company. That, you know, the founders literally need to be arrested, or frankly, military action is being taken against in some places, right? Some places in the U.S., maybe all of the U.S., right? So, I saw the most ridiculous clip on YouTube is a piece of propaganda misinformation called Dead D440, Aging in Hollywood Industry, on people. It was on some woman who like died before 40 because she wasn't comfortable with aging, and I thought, how do you talk about someone dying before 40 and over aging when it's literally an entire place run by people wearing masks and photoshopped who clearly aren't, or clearly over 40. I mean, J-Lo's like a size 12 or 14 and has herself photoshopped down to a size 4. Like, it's ridiculous. And wears a mask used of my face and other people. It's just bizarre. So I don't think I'm going to sit around and worry about what size I am or how I'm aging when I'm actually thinner than a lot of the people that supposedly appear on the red carpet in Hollywood and look younger than them in real life. I do have to note in other news, I have a new show called Simply Cooking with Deborah, which is exclusive to OnlyFans. I announced it monthly online, but I actually planned it over 10 years ago. I noticed all of a sudden Pam Anderson, who works with Buffalo Bill, has a new cooking show, which also looks terrible. And I didn't want to believe that she was just another Buffalo Bill person, that, you know, maybe she was someone who was abused or had her own struggles, but since she is a client of his and she's never paid me for the work that was trafficked from me, even in her last film. And I've discussed this in the past with TMZ and some other outlets, news industry groups. It seems like the most logical explanation is that she's just another whack job Russian FSB person, really no different than Meghan Markle, frankly. And frankly, someone else who's been way too comfortable with the photoshopping. I have her list of supposed relationships. So it's supposed to be CA, MN25, or Avidas, Creative Management, and, you look at Meghan Markle getting bad reviews. What about her? No, I think she's with Buffalo Bill. He's at Endeavor, so that's the cartels. Maybe Endeavor will just pick up and move to Russia. We just won't have to worry about them anymore. Just leave. I thought about that. Wouldn't that be nice? I have some really positive news, but I'm going to wait and hold on that. The financials for Endeavor, for those of you who are familiar with the company, the cartels, is of December 2024, as the revenue is down 0.91%. Their net income is down $165.89 million. And they are at a 1,242.55% net income loss. Their diluted EPS is at a negative 1.38. They're down 428.59%, and their net profit margin is down negative 10.5. They're also being listed as a net profit margin of 1,250% down. So those are like two totally different numbers. I think what they mean is the 1,250% down. It's really bad. And the Ukraine met with the United Kingdom and France, and they started discussing plans to deal with the situation with Russia and to ramp down and to create a ceasefire plan as of March 2nd, 2025. I hope they're very lucky with that. I also have to know that David Lynch died on January 16th, 2025 for the show. So anyone else who wants to know that? Let's see. My dog Hope definitively made it back down to Virginia. She is now living with a couple, so she's really no longer my dog. She has been happily rehomed with a nice married couple that I used to hang out with. I'm really happy for you both, and I'm really happy for her that she made it. And, here's a few other little things to go through. I'm going to wrap up here. It's important to note that Ugg Boots just took a hit on a pair that they had featured as being worn by JLo, where she just bought. It was the Classic Ultra mini high-heeled boots. The market value went down as of $227.25 simply because she wore them. Christian Dior, also her brand, has lost to $14 billion by October 2024 for her wearing it over the past years. Since they ordered nothing to work with other designers, that might also be some problem. I have relationships with a number of different designers, notably Versace, even Chanel. Even Vera Wang will try to send something my way, and other influencers, which is what most of the savviest companies do. I can't imagine being Donatella Versace and having your brother killed by this stupid group, and then you have to put up with JLo, demanding to be a part of your life at all. It looks like she's finally made a break from her. And she even had to do that ridiculous show with her, which I choreographed, where they just had JLo run through 10 years ago. Didn't bother to give her enough time to really do it because they didn't really want her in the Versace show in the first place. How disgusting is that? Look at what I went through and how gross it was. Imagine having your brother murdered by these people and you have to put up with one of them at your shows wearing your supposed designs. That's how she was. She was always like, oh, I want this and I want that. I want to be on top of everything. And it's disgusting. Notably, Jeff Bezos announced on Facebook that as of 2/26/2025, that his newspaper, the Washington Post, will now support personal liberties and free markets. Good for you, Jeff. Here's the problem. I think some of the issues, no one ever particularly cared about you being in a relationship with Lauren Sanchez because you're a wealthy man and they didn't want you to have access to other women. But you really actually need to dump her. She's really crazy. And apparently part of a terrorist organization. If you're wondering about some of the mentality and people sort of begging and being nasty, I dealt with, when I was at the Washington Times, one of the editors, Deborah Simmons, who I don't know if they ever fired her, but she told me that I owed all this to her community and others who was supposed to just be trafficked. And simply because I had known Cersei Willem, and it was really the opposite. I was trying to get away from them, and they had taken from me. How do you tell somebody they owe something for free? But that's the kind of mentality I dealt with in the 2000s. She's very much a Bush person and flipped to supporting Obama for presidency. Tells you there are people around there working at one time. It's just an anecdote from the past, but based on first-hand experience. I just really got frustrated with her and the mentality around the D.C. area of the, You know, it's just more. Everyone's in all this black, white, thin, tall, short, disabled or not. You know, they're way too crabby. It's disturbing. So hopefully that's over with. But and I have to note, there's a few more things here. Yeah, I'm gonna save some stuff for next week. I've got some other stuff we can talk about, and I think this is good. You know, it's a good edition of Simply Stated, and you know, really long, lengthy show. We're going on almost 40 minutes here, so I hope you're all doing well. I'm in a little dress and a necklace because I did some singing this morning, and I'll get up and sort of show you what I have on. Although I already put pants on because I was like, I'm cold. But I put this on and sang a little bit this morning, so. And we're gonna go with the cooking show. Bye.